All right, welcome back. Yes, indeed, we've got Mr. Olalekan Quadri, who is a former Director of Plantation and Cooperatives of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. We also do have Dr. Bello Abdullahi, who is a security consultant. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now we're going to start off with this economic management team. The president has reconstituted that. Now he's replaced them with an advisory council. So the advisory council will be reporting directly to the president, and then they're supposed to advise him based on economic matters and see how it goes. So we've got Professor Chukwuma Soludo as part of that team. We also do have Mr. Biswak Romani as member of that team. We have the chairman of that particular team. So eminent Nigerian personalities who are in that particular team. As you can see, Professor Doyin Salami, who is the chairman of that, and the list is what you see there. So yes, the president did say earlier that they expected to get millions of Nigerians out of poverty. So we'll start with that, gentlemen. Let me start with you, Mr. Bello. How do you see this particular move, Mr. Quadri?
Well, I must thank our president for taking this bold step, this bold initiative to actually harness the abundant human resources that we have in the country. For your information, poverty, unemployment does not discriminate. It doesn't know any party, whether PDP, whether APC, no. So it is important that we harness the human resources that we have in the country, and I think that is exactly what Mr. President have done, to actually tap from the wealth of experiences of eminent Nigerians, economists of no mean repute, to actually assist the country, to assist Mr. President in taking some critical decisions that could take us out of this wood, because actually it seems as if we are not going in the right direction. And so the earlier we harness some of these potentials of our eminent Nigerians, the better for us as a nation. And I'm very optimistic that with these eminent Nigerians coming on board to advise our president, I believe that we are going to begin to move in the right direction.
Mr. Abdullahi, it's an advisory council, not a management team. Do you see?
I think I have a different view of the strategic move by the president. Though it is commendable, but I think I want to equally advise that this plan should equally go beyond the mere notion of having a team as advisory economic team. It is believed that every government that comes have to have an advisory body on strategic issues or segments of the country or economy it manages. You see, this move of the president is coming, even though it is not late, but it's coming at a time when the country requires a giant stride towards economic rejuvenation. It has happened between 1999 to 2003, when the former president Olusegun Obasanjo reposed the confidence of his government in terms of management of the economy in the office of the vice president led by Atiku Abubakar. And much later in 2003, he realized that there was no much improvement or much achievement in that move. Then he changes the formula into having a strategic economic team, for which I believe one of the guys behind this move today is equally a member of the Buhari's advisory council, which is Professor Charles Soludo. But the difference between what the move of Obasanjo between 2003 and 2007 is quite different from the current Buhari's move of today. I can see on pages of newspapers that the president has launched an advisory council. The difference is that fundamentally in the case of Obasanjo, he reposed that confidence in a strategic economic teams in the hands of cabinet members who are ministers and heads of strategic parastatals that move the engine of the economy. But in this case, it is a case of having a specialized group of experts who would give advice, having thought and considered a lot of plethora of issues that are becoming problems.
So you don't think that would be effective?
To me, it depends on how the president perceives it to be and the confidence and powers he reposes in this team.
But he also says
there will be a disconnect.
Don't forget, he says they will also be liaising and working with the relevant heads of agencies and ministries to ensure that they move things forward.
He has to be a stabilizer in this case, because in most cases around the world, movers and shakers of an economy or economic team of presidents or leadership are coming from within those the president has given the confidence of serving in his cabinet, not necessarily a body coming from outside. Sometimes they may recommend other things, and then the cabinet people who see more than those who are outside players.
So you see politics inhibiting?
Yeah, politics could be a factor inhibiting the successes of the dream.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Quadri, you've been in service, in civil service. You know how it works. So do you see some sort of impediment in terms of if they have to liaise with those relevant agencies and then at the same time report to the president?
No, there is no conflict. I mean, you must take it for granted that they are all Nigerians in the first instance. Secondly, they are aware that Nigeria is having economic crisis in its hands, and so there is need for synergy. So there is no need for rivalry. I don't see them.
Yeah, but it happens.
It does. But these are eminently qualified Nigerians, and don't forget also that the ministers that have been appointed also they are appointees of Mr. President, and they are also interested in ensuring that the president delivers on his electoral mandate.
Okay, now let's talk about this National Livestock Transformation Plan. Lots of reactions coming through about this particular plan. So let me start with you, Dr. Bello. Concerning this particular plan, there's some mixed reservation about it because some don't quite get clearly when they say the federal government comes up with 80%, states have got to 20% and then provide the land. Some question, well, if they get to individual states now, are they going to give preference to those who who want to have ranches or cattle herders? Will the same thing apply to those who want to do other livestock? How do you view this plan?
This is a strategic plan, even though there is a missing link in terms of the propensity of sensitization of those concerned. For instance, I mean the segment of the Fulani population who are traditionally the herders, and equally interested parties among the diverse population who may be interested in, venturing into this multi-billion-dollar industry. I can equally see the metamorphosis of the policy agenda of the government, exposing some, holes of, do we call it inconsistency as a result of this problem of little or lack of, sensitization of the parties or the stakeholders involved, because the level of its sensitization is not to the extent that will comprehensively put the plan to Nigerians in such a way that could, have the desired impact. For example, in southern part of the country, people view this plan because it started like in the posa of cattle colony. Later, it metamorphosed into Ruga. Later, it metamorphosed into what we have today as the National Livestock Plan. All are the same. It depends on...
They are all the same.
They are all the same.
Even though they tell us it's different.
They're all the same. But the only difference with the current system is that it is more holistic. It is more investment oriented. It is more developmental focus.
Okay, but Mr. Quadri, yes. Many blame the Ministry of Agri, saying that they might have been responsible for quote-unquote bungling the misunderstanding or misconception that Nigerians have about the plan in the first instance, and now they think that they may not be entirely, free of blame in this particular one now. But concerning this policy, do you think it's the same?
Actually, it is not the same. They are not the same. The reason is that although they are not mutually exclusive, it might interest you to know that RUGA, or let me say, the National Livestock Transformation Plan is actually a more comprehensive, private sector driven, government enabled initiative, as it were. Unlike RUGA. RUGA is not private sector driven. It is government. It is exclusively to be driven by government. But in the case of National Livestock Transformation Agenda, it is private sector. It is to be private sector driven, but government enabled.
How is this private sector driven? If government, federal government, is coming up with 80%,
yes,
the states 20% and provide the land.
Yes.
Where is the private sector drive, leadership here?
Yeah, the federal government actually is to provide the enabling environment to catalyze the process. Agriculture, you need to understand the nature of agriculture.
I thought the 80% also includes funding.
Yeah, it includes funding actually. But what we are saying is that, you see, agriculture is regarded as one of the most risky sectors of the economy. So if government doesn't come in to support it, you are not likely to achieve the desired result. For example, let me say, for example, if you have 100 million naira today, are you likely to go into agriculture? No. You would rather go into buying and selling or go into oil and gas or something.
Well, some will argue that there is no business that doesn't have its risk. But, Mr. Abdullahi, one of the concerns that a number of people have about this plan is, something that Chamberlain asked, and I think it needs a little bit of attention so that people can understand it better. Why would government invest 100% in a project or a business that is supposed to be private sector driven? Help us understand it.
I think in my background, I happen to come from a mixed family. My mother happens to be a herder, a Fulani so to say, while my father happens to be one of the tribes from Taraba State, so to say, Jukun tribe. And I have an experience of participating fully in these activities of the herders for about 7 years in my life, moving cattle from Bauchi, Plateau State, into Nasarawa, Benue, to Kogi State, into Enugu, in Nsukka. Some years when I was at the tender, years. Importantly, from the beginning of these activities, two issues are involved. The issue of national security, which is connected to a particular species that specializes in this herding of cattle. And government need to equally, because you cannot divorce completely the hands of government in these activities in order to secure the security of this land. Secondly, the issue of funding the projects. Normally in this type of arrangement, which has connection with tradition and security, government need to be the pace setter, in line with the observation of my friend here, that the government has to be the foundation laying pillar, so that any other thing can be built upon it. But most in particular, just as I argued from the beginning, that whether colony or RUGA or whatever, RUGA has been in existence as far back as, in fact, before pre-colonial times. It depends on the concept government is trying to use. But my observation is that the government should look for those people who have the experience, and then go to other countries like Canada, like Australia, and Uruguay in South America, and learn the way the government, like in Uruguay, for example, somebody wrote this morning in an article in Daily Trust, and was saying that in Uruguay, the government of Uruguay has made the cow, this herding, the professional investment-driven herding, as its national resource base, like the way Nigeria is to oil. And last year, or last 2 years, that government has been able to make a lot of earnings from this, to such an extent that this activity has raised the standard of living of that country to such an extent that the per capita income is about 22,000 US dollars.
Okay.
And today, that country generates about $1.4 billion from this
I need
activities.
him to come in before we go to break on this. So you see, emphasis appears to be on the cattle. So that's why he thinks it's the same thing. So the livestock toga that they've given to it, they all downplay the other livestock about this matter.
Yeah, but I want you to know that livestock value chain is not just about cattle.
Granted.
Exactly.
But
You talk of milk, you talk of dairy. Dairy is an aspect of the livestock value chain. You talk of skin and
Hides and skin, yeah.
Yes, leather, skin and leather. You talk about beef. It's also part of an integral part of the value chain of livestock value chain. So my own understanding, and you need to read the document on livestock transformation plan. For example, it is based on 5 strategic pillars: strategic communications, humanitarian reliefs. You talk about economic empowerment, that is livestock improvement. You also talk about conflict resolution.
okay.
So these are some of the.
All right. Well, we'll come back to this. You know, there are many perspectives to this matter, which we will get when we come back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Yes, we did say that there are many perspectives. One of them happens to be in Lagos, and they will be coming from there now. Kaide.
Mr. Peter Otache is the former vice president of New Arewa Forum. He joins us this morning to share his perspective on the National Livestock Transformation Plan of the government. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
First question, are you excited by the NLTP?
No.
Why?
If you take a look at this thing, it's something that is the same thing being turned over and over and over again. And I would actually like to divert slightly from the question you asked, by saying something that'll surprise you.
Is it also about the NLTP?
I actually wanted to go back into history.
Right.
I mean, history, because like they say, if you do not, how is it said?
Know where you're coming from.
If you do not learn from mistakes in history, it means you are bound to repeat them. You know, long ago, I mean, I'm talking about the 11th, 12th century, what we had in Africa were agrarian societies. Virtually all the societies in Africa were agrarian societies. I mean, this can be verified by going back in history. Why I'm going back on this issue is when there was the migration of Arabs into Egypt. This is what happened in Egypt. Egypt was under the Romans, and the Romans had a system by which they maintained the paved roads all around Egypt. What did they do? They planted olive trees on both sides of the road, and then whoever managed those olive trees, also whoever benefited from them, also repaired this road. And if you notice, everywhere, unfortunately, at the point the Arabs migrated into Egypt and into North Africa, what did they do? The average Arab family had 20 to 40 goats. What they did was feed them on the farms of Africans who were agrarians. This eventually killed that society. And I'm telling you, today, what we are seeing didn't just start today. It's not Ruga, it's not whatever. For all, it has been a process I actually think, and I believe, and I can tell you why, it's jihad.
That's a huge claim.
Yes,
but
it is.
You understand that the government is saying the NLTP, that's the National Livestock Transformation Plan, is meant to solve the security challenge between farmers and herders.
There's no conflict between farmers and herders.
How do you mean?
What happens between farmers and herders is not a conflict, it's a genocide. I come from a place called Igaopaya in Benue State, which is part of the Ocheku Agatu community. There was no conflict anywhere. One day, we woke up, and then the Fulani herdsmen coming and massacring people. Where did the conflict arise from? Sometimes when they talk about these issues, they say it's cow rustling. Where I come from, the average person sees a cow, he runs away. How much more? Talk about stealing a cow? We're not used to it. It's not we're agrarians. Everything we do is farmland. If you go all the way, starting from the fringes of Idoma land until the end in Agatu, our borders with Enugu, we don't rear cattle. So usually you'll be surprised. Little boys say these things and then they run away. When the government is referring to conflict, there's no conflict anywhere.
Okay.
What's happening is just genocide.
I'm sure that's a huge claim. And
yes, it is.
I'd like you to be much more careful with the terms we use. But let's look at what the federal government says this NLTP is meant to solve. We understand, yes, apart from security, the vice president put out a statement just outlining this NLTP. And one of the things he said was that NLTP is not Ruga. But then you have said that it is beyond Ruga,
it's beyond
or
Ruga
NLTP.
or NLTP.
But then also you have interacted with cattle owners. Okay, in fact, that's it. We understand that this NLTP was developed in 2018 by federal government and state governments. And according to the government, they say it was a coming together of stakeholders saying, what is the way forward? And then they thought, let's do the NLTP. So this is perhaps a major concerted effort of stakeholders. So do you think that they didn't factor in some of the concerns you raised, the stakeholders at this meeting?
It depends. Who do you refer to as the stakeholders?
The governors, Nigeria Governors Forum, for example.
As the stakeholders. I would assume you would come to the people with whom you think there's a conflict. I doubt if anybody ever came into my community. So what do you mean stakeholders?
So you're saying that the states, when these attacks happened, you didn't get any form of intervention from the state?
That's quite a question, because if I'm going to answer this question, you just said I should be careful with my terms. That I'll be. When this thing started, if you remember, we were all over Facebook, all the social media, trying to get the government attention. This is another tall thing. We tried getting government attention, and it won't work. But do you know what made it work? We resorted to some form of self-help, self-defense. Somehow we had to enter the bushes. It's our land. We're able to recover, sometimes get certain things, fight them back. And then when we were about having, or when it had been seen that we're having the upper hand, the army arrived. Does that look like does it look like coincidence?
I'd like us to focus on the NLTP, because this is the crux of our conversation.
Okay, let's focus on the NLTP
this morning. So if perhaps the government is saying this will solve security, this will also create jobs, this will mean economic boom for those areas.
Okay.
Do you think it's not laudable enough if that is the goal, according to the government?
No, it's not. And I'm going to say something. If you look through that plan, even they still keep talking about government ceding land. I haven't read through it. I don't know if it's all the states of the country or just a section of the country.
Yeah, it's meant to be voluntary. If you want to be a part of it, no problem. That's according to...
I am sure my people wouldn't want to be a part of it. I'm from Benue State. And obviously you have had Tom make comments. And then I'm going to say something else that will surprise you. There are quite a number of states, particularly the southeast. Let me use Anambra for an example. Anambra has 425,000 square kilometers or square meters of land. I did the math, and then going by the official census figure of Nigeria, the official census figure, Anambra has over 4 million people. Me and you, we all dream of having houses in our hometowns one day. I stand here to tell you that in eastern Nigeria, quite a number of states apart from Ebonyi in eastern Nigeria, if you break those lands into 700 or 650 square meters, what we refer to as a plot in Anambra State, and share the land between the Anambra indigents, they wouldn't have a plot.
So I don't think this should
No,
be
no,
an
no.
issue,
It
because
is an
it's
issue.
meant to be voluntary.
Because
So
land-
if the Anambra State government, for example, says we don't want it, then there should not be an issue.
I think, yes, you're right. If they say they don't.
So now, I'd also like us to steer the attention towards, finding a lasting solution, because I understand that from both parties. I want to believe that you're looking for a solution.
Yes, we are.
Which is why you're speaking so passionately. So
Yes.
what do you think the solutions should be?
This Ruga or whatever, definitely wouldn't bring any solution.
Even though it's voluntary, and
Even
each state decides.
though it is voluntary.
Okay.
We don't want cows, we don't want cows. We don't want people. We don't want people who would come and try to wrench our lands. That's what they have done.
When you say we, who do you mean?
Yes.
We.
I mean the people of the Middle Belt, and particularly my people, the Idoma people. I am an Idoma, and I know my own people. We do not want any Ruga, and I'm sure we wouldn't want to cede land. I'm going to tell you, okay, maybe I shouldn't go into that. There's some land that was taken way back and used for something that's in my mother's hometown of Odudaje in Otukpo local government. And it included virtually all the land in the town. I don't know what they used it for then. I don't think we would want to afford land for anything like that.
So what are the solutions?
The solutions are simple. We don't want livestock. If we want livestock, we'll go and buy.
No,
And
I understand that is what you don't want. So I'm saying, so moving forward, what are the solutions you are putting to the table?
If you listen to what I said at first, solutions I am looking at these things not from an agricultural perspective and not from the perspective you're looking at it. I'm looking at it, and that is what my people in general believe. This thing is more of a religious thing than it is what all attempts to go and dodge around things, doing Ruga and everything, we just believe that what is happening to our people, it's a tall claim, as you say.
Which is why
it's jihad.
We'll come back to that, the
Yes.
solutions. But then there's a danger here if we don't handle this well, that this might degenerate further. Might split us across ethnic, leanings, across religious leanings. And we all know that that never works.
Yeah.
So which is why I want us to steer the conversation towards the solution. We need to handle this well. Regardless of whatever has been said, whatever has happened, we're looking at the future. You said it, that if you fail to learn from what has happened in the past, you fail to learn from your mistakes, you keep making them. So which is why I'm saying, what solutions are you bringing to the table?
The solutions we have brought to the table with our own people is to tell them the truth of what we think. I told you this herder thing didn't start today. It started since the 9th century. And gradually it has crept across from North Africa until it got to this part of Africa. It started not now. It started. You hear history, but history has been bent. The truth of the matter is all these things were actually jihad from North Africa all the way here. And you're asking me for a solution in one Ruga thing?
This is not, you have established that
Yes.
this is not what you want. That is established. So I'm asking, leaving that aside, what solutions?
Educating our people and letting them know that this so-called herdsman thing is not about coming to an end. We have to learn the truth. And if you know the truth...
that's a bit, that's on one hand, huge claims you're making.
Yes,
and like I said, I'd like us to be careful
yes.
with our terms. And also, this is a bit pessimistic. It appears to me as though you're saying, I'd like things to keep going on this way.
Not that I like things to keep going on this way.
So you have mentioned...
Unfortunately...
you said that
Unfortunately, if this thing has gone on for close to 14 centuries, that's what I'm trying to tell you.
The fact that, Mr. Otachi, the fact that this has always been does not mean it has to always be. If I'm taking a cue from what you have said. So once again, you have not exactly given me some solution, or the Nigerians out there.
I'm going to ask
for
you.
the government.
I'm going to ask you this.
Well, I'm sure you know that you're switching the roles. I am asking, but
Yes,
we'll come
you
back
are
to this.
asking, but
Let's go to
sometimes-
Abuja. We'd like to
Okay.
go to Abuja. We'll come
Okay.
back to this conversation. Guys, let's continue in Abuja.
All right, well, gentlemen, you heard the narrative. He is of that perspective that this is jihad. You highlighted some of the high points of this, one of which is strategic communication. So if that were the case, how do they speak strategically to those who are of that impression? Because you heard him, he's not interested in livestock. Yet it's a livestock plan. Mr. Quadri.
Yeah, I think there is need for stakeholders consultation, wider consultations with all the stakeholders. And there is need for us to actually look beyond. You know, when you have, the way I look at it, I see this as a huge opportunity for Nigeria to tap into. You recall that the CBN recently said that about $1.3 billion is spent annually on milk importation. Imagine if that money is to be brought back to the Nigerian economy. I mean, it's going to create a lot of jobs, it's going to create wealth for our people and stuff. So my own thinking is that we should see the opportunities, not the problems.
I think that's greatly underscored, and I believe that that's one of the reasons the federal government is going into it. But Mr. Abdullahi, one of the critical things to look at is that on the one hand, Benue State is one of the 7 primary states that's supposed to initiate this. Our guest in Lagos is from that state, and it seems that there wasn't wide enough consultation among the people, critical stakeholders in that state, before the state was adopted.
Even though it's a voluntary scheme.
Absolutely, I support your motion that there was no, high-level propensity sensitization before even Benue State moved into implementing whatever policy it calls it in terms of ranching and others. Like the young, or one of our friends there in Lagos just spoken about the issue, he has no solution to the problem. We as a nation cannot collectively maintain an embarrassing silence which could further exacerbate the security challenges of this country. There must be solution. And I see from the giant stride, the action of the government of bringing or fashioning out this plan is towards bringing a lasting solution to this perennial problem. But I am equally of the belief that in line with the spirit of looking for solution, the government has to equally do more in terms of setting the foundation upon which the plan itself would work. I agree with the 5 pillars of the plan in terms of strategic communication, which is basic, without which the plan will be a collection of, or a collection of paragraphs of jokes.
So who should lead this strategic communication?
First is the government. Second is
when you say government, federal or state?
Both. When I say government, I mean government at all tiers.
But don't forget that this plan will be executed largely in the in interior localities.
Of course, government is government anywhere, whether local government, state government, and federal government. Government collectively has a big responsibility of sensitizing the population within that pillar of strategic communication. Secondly, do it make something practical to happen? And I always refer that government should learn from the experiences of those who have excelled in this business, like this, the Australians, the Canadians, and then the very good example of Uruguay. Uruguay is not, the population of Uruguay is not up to that of Benue. It's just a population of about 3 million people, generating 1.4 billion from beef, generating about $800 million from the dairy segment of the business chain, and equally about $400 million US annually from the other chain of hides and skin, or leather, you call it. But this is a dream that this tiny country in South America is going global with just cow as the super structure
And that
of the
is
economy.
and that's one of the elements of this, last national livestock transformation plan. But Mr. Kodri, as we, taper down on this conversation now, conversations with the people who will execute this thing is key, and it needs to go down to the grassroots. But it seems that has not been sufficiently done, and the plan is already in action. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, the thing is that, Nigeria, you will agree with me that we are experts when it comes to planning, but we always have issues with implementation. All government needs to do is to demonstrate.
How?
Engage the critical stakeholders, bring in the money, bring in the investment, put up the ranches, demonstrate to people that these things can actually work, and let people see that actually they can make money out of this plan. Let them show it, demonstrate it. It's not about talking. It is not about bringing people together alone, communicating with them. Oh, this is how we are going to solve this problem. No, let there be action. Let them show action. Let the state government also show commitment and dedication. Let them be committed, and then let the private sector also that are interested also be identified, and let them be brought on board.
All right, so action speaks louder than words, you seem to be saying. Well, Mr. Olalekan Kwadwo is a former director, plantation and cooperatives with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. We also did have Dr. Bello Abdullahi, who is a security consultant. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
We will be back in a moment. Stay with us.
So we're in our concluding moments, and we still have Mr. Peter Otache, as a former vice president of New Arewa Group, the Youth Forum. Thank you for staying with us. Now, in our concluding moments, you have said, you have established that you're not in support of the NLTP.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
And then I wonder, are you speaking for yourself or perhaps a group? Because we remember the governor of Benue State saying, although he's against Ruga for, Fulani, he's not against the NLTP, especially because he was a part of the National Economic Council that deliberated on this and came out with the NLTP. So is this for you or for the whole of Benue State?
Let me just say, if you are going to do, whatever you are going to do, livestock, we're spending too much time discussing people's businesses. Livestock are individual businesses, not government businesses. I mean, if there is no motive behind this thing, why is the government thinking of investing so much in the businesses that belong to a certain group of people? That's one. And then who told you I don't want to make money from livestock?
So you don't mind joining in this
money
plan?
From livestock. But listen, why should you bring a Fulani man to my land to train livestock when I have unemployed Idoma youth I can train to do livestock? If you are sincere, it wouldn't be a Fulani man. If you are sincere, you could make every state self-reliant in livestock.
So
just
to be clear, the NLTP does not have a clause of Fulani, at least on paper. So it's National Livestock Transformation Plan. So I wonder where you get that from.
We'll see.
Right. So I'll drag you back to the solutions.
Yes.
On a final note.
Yes.
So what are your solutions?
These are parts of the solution. If we want to develop livestock and make it a major source of foreign exchange, it shouldn't go to one class of people. What we should do is, if we have land and we have given, you don't bring foreigners to come and rear livestock on our land. Why don't you encourage us to do that business?
Shouldn't it be your state government now saying that this is how we want it to work in our state, especially because they say that this is meant to be on the terms of the state government?
Maybe I hadn't actually studied it to that extent, but I can assure you. Anyway, one last thing I want to say, which will take you by surprise, because if the government is sincere, what I said is what I think they should do. But anyway, if you see the end of the problem, I don't, and I'm going to tell you why. This is the last thing I'm going to say.
Isn't that pessimistic?
No. But why don't you listen to it to the end? The truth about all this thing, like I told you from the beginning when we started, is jihad. And jihad is going on all around the world. Pakistan, think of virtually every nation where there is a clash of these two religions. There's jihad going on.
Once again,
what makes you think it's going to stop
I'm sure a
in
lot of
Nigeria?
people will disagree with you.
Yes.
I would like to thank you so much, Mr. Peter.
Thank you very much.
Otache, former Vice President of the New Arewa Youth Forum. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much.
And we definitely look for an end in sight to this. Have a great time. Well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I am Kayode Okikiolu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde.
I'm Chamberlain Oso. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this program are those of the maker and do not reflect the views, opinions, and endorsement of Channels Television.